That's not valid identification, she scoffed, flicking my license into the bushes like it was yesterday's trash. Then, without missing a beat, she barked into her phone. Yes, I need police. There's a suspicious man claiming he owns a home in Sycamore Ridge. He won't leave the premises. I stood quietly, watching her escalate, amused that she had no idea who I really was. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the civil planner behind her entire subdivision. In the call I made right after hers, it halted the permits on her $3 million villa before the morning mimosas could hit her brunch table. My name is Ethan Rourke, 41, infrastructure engineer, builder, and generally the guy who prefers quiet over conflict. I plan entire neighborhoods from scratch, grading, underground utilities, drainage systems, and everything in between. 2 decades in the field, I've had my hands on dozens of communities, from hilltop mansions to entry-level homes with postage stamp lawns. As part of the latest contract, Sycamore Ridge, I snagged one of the early lots as a perk. A sleek, modern build in a place where the WA promised hands-off oversight and owner-first policies. At least, that's what the brochure said. Peace at last. The roads followed the natural hills, utilities ran beneath the surface, and the retention basin could hold back a once-in-a-century flood. I had spent over a year drafting the whole thing, each conduit, pipe, and slope line. And for 2 glorious weeks, it felt like the perfect reward. That was until Leslie Dart, the WA president, decided I didn't fit her mold of a proper resident. She looked mid-50s, tight bobbed hair sprayed stiff, with that air of someone who lives to cross things off lists. Her wardrobe looked like it was purchased in bulk from a golf course pro shop, neatly pressed polos with the WA crest, khakis so crisp they rustled when she walked, and a clipboard she wielded like a sword. She never once asked who I was. She simply assumed I was trespassing. Apparently, a guy in boots and a utility vest didn't blend well into her suburban utopia. Our first encounter, she stormed over while I was planting a lemon tree in the front yard, practically stomping over the mulch I'd just laid, to declare that my driveway slope was 1 degree too steep. Section 9B of the HOA covenant mandates driveways may not exceed a 12% incline, she snapped, flipping through her papers like she was unveiling a war crime. I politely explained that the driveway was engineered to city code, which supersedes WA guidelines. Her eyes narrowed, as if I'd just challenged the sanctity of her clipboard. From that day, the campaign began. She issued me a notice for excessive watering on my drought-resistant shrubs. That was rich, since I personally programmed the irrigation timers. She filed a complaint for unauthorized ground cover, not realizing I used the exact landscaping materials her board approved. Another notice cited me for lacking WA-approved window decals. I didn't even know decals were required. When I tried to tell her I had personally drawn the plans for her own sewer line, she sneered and said, "So you're the one we can blame for the backup risk." The irony, the system I designed had so much capacity it could flush 3 neighborhoods without a hiccup. She started poking around while I was gone. Neighbors told me they'd seen her taking photos near my back gate. One mentioned she'd even tried shining a flashlight into my door camera. Another whispered that she was asking around to see if I was just a contractor squatting while a real homeowner finalized the purchase. Soon, my door became a bulletin board for her passive-aggressive legal notes. Grass a 1/4 inch too long. Trash bins visible between 7 o'clock and 7:05 a.m. One day, I got fined for parking in my own driveway while loading up tools. Every notice came with a fine and a vague threat of legal escalation. So, I started documenting everything. I kept logs, snapped photos, recorded her interactions with other residents. Then came the showdown. One Thursday morning, I returned from my run to find her standing at my front door with 2 other WA board members. Their arms were folded like nightclub bouncers blocking entry. "I need to see identification and ownership proof," she said firmly. I pulled out my ID, calmly explaining that I'd lived there for weeks, that I was in fact one of the first residents. She scrutinized my license as though it had been drawn in crayon. "This address doesn't match the database. You're not on file." She tossed my ID into the yard and raised her voice. "Yes, 911, she told her phone loudly, ensuring the neighbors gathering nearby could hear. "There's a man here pretending to be a resident. He's hostile and refuses to leave." I watched my ID disappear under a bush while she painted me as a threat. Minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up. Leslie wore a smug smile as she greeted the officers with the air of a sheriff deputizing a posse. She launched into a tirade about my supposed violations and called me a security threat. The officers turned to me. "Sir, may we see your identification?" "Of course," I replied, retrieving not only my license but a large rolled blueprint set from my car. I unscrolled them over the hood of their cruiser. "Ethan Rourke, Certified Infrastructure Planner. These are the original civil plans for Sycamore Ridge. My name's stamped on every one." One officer, Sergeant Wilkes, studied the sheet. "Wait, I recognize this. You're the one who proposed the integrated runoff basin at the city council meeting last year." "That's right," I nodded. "Also designed the water mains, power layout, and road grid." Leslie's smile disintegrated. But I wasn't done. I placed a call to the developer and the legal department. You see, her house was still in Phase 3, and that phase hadn't cleared final review. Permits, inspections, and final utility links all passed through my desk. And people who file false reports and harass owners. That's a massive liability. Within 48 hours, her project halted. Suddenly, the inspections she'd passed were under reevaluation. Drainage approvals under dispute. Utility plans awaiting clarification. Even her soil compaction test results withheld pending validation. The WA board scrambled. Emergency meetings were called. Attorneys consulted. It was only a matter of time before the skeletons in her file came to light. Turns out, Leslie had been fast-tracking her construction by funneling WA reserve funds into private inspections and exclusive permits, without disclosure. She had personally authorized nearly $17,000 worth of expedited services for her lot. Money that should have gone toward fixing cracked sidewalks and maintaining common landscaping. I laid all this out in a meeting with the developer. He nearly choked on his coffee. She used WA money for what? The next day, the worksite at her lot was abandoned. Tools gone. Porta potty vanished. The contractor disappeared like smoke. Leslie arrived later that morning to find a dry hose spraying into a muddy trench and lost her mind, screaming at the dirt like it was her betrayer. That evening, the WA board voted her out unanimously. Even her own vice president called for her immediate removal. Homeowners were notified of her misuse of funds, the false reports, and the illegal ID incident. She was banned from holding any WA or neighborhood leadership position permanently. Her $3 million build cancelled, relisted. The floor plan rebranded as the Rourke, with brushed steel signage that includes visible owner credentials by design. But it didn't stop there. The state's real estate licensing board opened an inquiry into her conduct. Once they got wind of the financial misappropriation, the local DA stepped in. Charges were filed: misuse of public trust funds, impersonation, and knowingly filing a false police report. In court, the judge didn't mince words. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of the hoe's stolen money. She stood frozen, wide-eyed, realizing her little WA dictatorship had just cost her everything.